You want to mute her microphone?
I heard it. All right, we're live.
Yeah.
Let's. I'm gonna wait to get my note. It usually takes a minute here. I get my notification. What I like to do is I follow along on my phone for the comments because it's hard for me to do two split screens, like follow like going between tabs. So we're not gonna do that.
Can I
We're
pull that
giving it a
up on
minute.
my LinkedIn as well, or will
Yeah,
it kind of?
but but but
Okay.
but mute it on your. Be careful because you don't want to hear. There's a delay, so you don't want to hear yourself talking like 5 seconds earlier.
Yeah. You know what? I just won't do it. I'll just watch the playback.
You
Yeah.
can just watch. It'll be easier there. Hold on. Let's try to get this going. Hey everybody. It is Wednesday afternoon. We are on the podcast live. We are gearing up here. We have Aaron Moore, Jen Fox, who's working through some technical difficulties. I'm going to mute her so we don't hear that. Right? Isn't that better now?
Yeah, that's good.
I took her off there. We're going to just load up everybody. We got 4 people on the stream. We're going to figure out what's happening here. Let this build up a little bit. What is it? Aaron, where are you located? Where are you at, man?
St. Louis, Missouri, man.
St. Louis. I have not
Yeah.
been to St. Louis, Missouri. I've not been there yet.
Right in the middle of everything. Yeah.
Right in the flyovers, right?
Yeah.
That's what they call it there. We have a couple people joining on. We're going to wait for Jen to hop back on there, give some people some time to join, get some critical mass on this show. Yeah, but I'm basically going to ask, what's happening? What are you up to? We'll get into all that in a little bit. We got 2 people joining on here on the podcast live.
Yeah.
I like to mix it up. I like to try new things. So I got my regular show, the podcast. I don't know if you had a chance to check it out. It's that cool little icon in the corner there, if you can see it.
Yeah.
That's the show. So yeah, we're about 48 episodes in, and that show it started out as a journey where, as a recruiter, I wanted to showcase all the people in my network that add value, right? All the talent acquisition pros, the HR people, the resume writers, the coaches, and bring it to life. And then the show started taking on a life of its own, where guests came my way, whether they were in my network or not, that have really amazing life stories.
Yeah.
Right, that have crazy journeys, and it went in a really interesting direction. So I have a whole bunch of former Olympians, NFL athletes, coming up on my 2nd season, and we're going to start talking about their life and their journey as a professional athlete, something I can't even relate to because I have zero athletic ability. But talking about their journey, and then talk a little bit more about their transition into the business world or speaking or coaching. So we'll get to that in a little bit. I'd like to see this pick up a little bit. It's only a couple people on. Usually at this point we're a little bit higher than that. So we'll let Jen come back in. There's no rush. What's your time limit here, man?
I'm good, man. I think I set it up for about an hour. So
yeah, we're not going to go that long, but I'm going to wait till we pick up here. We are losing people like flies. Where is everybody? Where's Mike Vacanti? Mike Vacanti, where are you? You said you were going to tune in here. Aaron, where are your people at? Where are my people at? I mean,
I didn't repost this. I should have
do it now.
The old retweet. Yeah.
Do it now. Tell people you're online. We're chilling. It's interesting too because I've experimented this different times of day. Like people are working, people are doing stuff there. So I get a lot on the replays. The replays are usually pretty strong. Jen, let me unmute you there.
Hold on. Yeah. Okay.
It's still going. Oh man. We'll get there.
Hold on. I'm switching over. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
All right, I'm gonna mute you there. And then we'll kick it off, man. So we can I'll start with Aaron here because we could and Jen, you can hear me, right? While we're doing all this? Okay, cool. I just got you on mute. Jen, give me a thumbs up when you're ready to go.
I'm actually sharing the post right now.
Yeah, we'll give it a minute there to kick in. That's what's cool about live. I've done maybe 6 or 7 of these. You start to get a sense of the flow of a live show and when people are on board. Anyone in the comments, say what's up. Let's see who we got on. Here we go. Now the numbers are kicking up a little bit. That's what I like to see. Let's go. Get it going, everybody. It is hump day. It is the hump part of the week. It's like the St. Louis Arch here of the week, if you want to draw a little diagram on it. So Aaron, are you native? Are you born and raised in Missouri?
Yeah, man. I am nowhere else as far as living, as far as that goes. But it's good. We got good sports, good food. It's good. It's a nice town to be in.
Yeah. What are you what are your sports teams, man? Are you all local?
Pretty much. As far as when the Rams left us, that was kind of hard. But I'm a Niners fan, so my basketball and my football teams are Bay Area, so Warriors, Niners, and I'm a big Ohio State fan. Oh wait.
All right. That's cool, man.
Yeah, and then of course St. Louis Cardinals, St. Louis Blues. We got a great hockey team.
Yeah,
I know.
I know. I'm a baseball guy too. Jen Fox is back there. Let's try her back here. Jen.
Hey, Jen.
I'm back.
Yes, there we go. And now it's a party. Two's a company, three's a crowd.
Just a little suspense, that's all.
Jen, where we talking to? Where are you located?
Weehawken, New Jersey.
Jersey in the house. All right, we got St. Louis, Missouri. We got Weehawken, New Jersey, and we have Long Beach, New York. So let's kick things off the right way. It is Wednesday afternoon. It is 2 p.m. here on the East Coast, 1 p.m. Central Time for my man Aaron over there. Right, yeah. Right. I got that right. I always do bad with the time zones. My math is terrible. But everybody, welcome to the Podcast Live. This is the live version of the growing and in my head super popular podcast where I feature the best and brightest in the world of business marketing and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity to drive your career forward. I love the live show, and we're doing something a little bit different today. It was literally like, I have a half hour on my calendar. I want to try something new. So I'm going to open it up to my community and say, hey, let me just pick 2 people at random. Let's get them on the show. And we're going to find out a little bit more about what everybody does. So we are broadcasting live from the Bridgeworks co-working space here in Long Beach, New York. It is like WeWorks, but a lot better. It's pretty freaking awesome where I am here. And I'm going to lead things off here. And Aaron, I'm a recruiter. You're a recruiter.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask you the same thing I ask all my candidates. Tell me who you are and what you do best.
Yeah. So for me, man, I think just who I am as far as how I approach life, and just it's the only natural way I know how to approach recruiting is I'm just a big people person. I'm a big empathetic person, man. I think I like to get to the heart of people, who they really are, what makes them click, what makes them tick, just their DNA. And I find a lot of that out in conversation. And a buddy of mine actually saw that in me, and I was working retail before I moved into recruiting. And he's like, man, are you dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? You happy? Like, I know you're successful. Like, have you thought about recruiting? I didn't even know. I didn't know. I was like, I'm not going to the military when he said recruiting.
Yeah, the journey. Everyone's journey into recruiting is different. I went down an interesting career path. What type of recruiting do you do?
So I'm currently working for Western Specialty Contractors. So we're a full service specialty contractor. We specialize in waterproofing, masonry restoration. So we're all over the nation. And so I do all of the internal recruiting for the organization, project manager, superintendent.
So you're an in-house recruiter?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Got it.
Came from the agency side.
But you did. So you started in the agency world. So you're an agency recruiter. And what were you recruiting on that side?
Some of everything. I would say my bread and butter was probably general office, finance. I did a lot of finance. Then I branched a little bit over into architecture, engineering, construction, and that was kind of my bridge into the construction world for recruiting. So
interesting, man.
Yeah.
And we talked about it too, where we'll pause on that for a second here. My third guest, not third most important, just the third guest, my second guest on the show. I am the third person. Jen Fox, welcome. And for everyone's background, Jen and I met about a month ago to the date at VaynerMedia during Mike Vacanti's book launch. We didn't have a chance to connect there too much. It was a crazy event. So hopefully we can do that now. Jen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And I'm going to ask you the same question. Tell us who you are and what you do best.
I haven't been on an interview for so long, let alone with 2 recruiters at the same time. So.
Oh, it's a gauntlet here.
Aaron, I love your story about the sort of accidental recruiter, and I think that's sort of the beginning of my career. I'm an accidental learning professional, I would say. Nice. For the last sort of 20 years, I've been boil it down to helping people achieve their goals. That was in the management capacity within the corporate world. And then the last 7 years on my own as a coach, facilitator, and a HR consultant. So looking back, that's really where it was inside of companies or individual coaching, really, I like to say, help people get out of their own way. And then looking forward, I'm going to be kind of building on that foundation and pivoting to an audience that's very near and dear to my heart, that of busy moms. So
love it.
Shifting a little bit in the year ahead.
That's awesome. So that's pretty interesting too. So Jen, tell us a little bit about you said you're shifting into that working mom, that busy mom audience. But tell us who's your typical client, who's your typical customer that you work with?
Yeah. So right now, in the last, sort of 7 years since I've been on my own, I've been lucky enough to work with some really great companies where I'm actually sort of inside, outside. I'm on site providing consulting around, leadership, management, culture, all of that kind of people stuff that I feel like it's so easily overlooked. I know I'm sort of preaching to the choir with you guys. I know, Adam, having met you at Mike's event, I already know, even though we don't know each other, I know that we kind of stand for the same things. And then on the individual basis, it's really those same people, those growth mindset people who are not willing, they can be very grateful for the life of the career that they've had, but they know they can take it to the next level. So I would say the common denominator across all of them is it's that growth mindset, and it's sort of agnostic to industry level, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things I've been hearing a lot lately. I hear people throw around empathy, people throw around growth mindset, heart first, humans first and everything. But how do people put that into practice? And I'll start with you, Aaron. I had a chance, you posted an amazing video today, which was very tactical and actionable. We'll talk about the actual content that of a little bit. But what resonated with me most is you and your approach and the way you position yourself. Where do you think this is it always been in you? I mean, you just come off as so genuine, authentic, and that you really care about people. Where does that come from?
Yeah, man. I think it would just have to be just how I was raised. Honestly, I think that's what I can attribute it to. I always say, my grandpa is my hero. God rest his soul, he's gone now.
I love it.
I think he just always put into me that he would always say, "You do right, you treat people right." And I mean, there's no like big majestic, there's nothing deep about that. But
the golden rule applies, right? The golden rule.
Yeah, he just like put that in me. So I've always had a heart for people. When people are, whether they're destitute or they need help with work or things that come to me naturally, it's in me. Kind of hearing what Jen said is it resonated with me. It's in me to want to teach and show people how. And I think being able to get into the recruiter seat was, man, a lot of things that I take for granted when it comes to forming a resume, talking to people, being on an interview. Like, I can do that in my sleep.
Love it.
Like, but I've seen a lot of people that just honestly get anxiety and they can fumble over it. I'm like, man, I want to show them how and show them the practical ways on how to implement that. So, that's from a job standpoint. But even outside of it, my wife teased me because we couldn't drive past the little girls that had the lemonade stand at the end of our street, and they were there when we left, and they were there when we came back, and I could not. I'm like, man, all right, we'll buy 2 cups of lemonade. It's just kind of like, I love it. I love
it's
it.
A good heart, man. No, I love it. And Jen, I asked you, right? I mean, you worked in corporate America. Like, what was it like going out on your own? Like, was it scary? Like, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, so confession is, I said, I sort of off-ramped, if you will, when I had my second daughter, and I said I would take a year off, and it's been 7.
Life's a you can't see where life goes.
how it goes. Scary, yes. I would say more empowering, exciting. I have the really fortunate circumstance of, I could go in-house, in some really great companies for some leaders that I really respect. But I love being able to stay objective. I love being able to gather like expertise and best practice and ideas like from everywhere and bring it in. So, and not getting caught up in the politics, I think that sometimes, weighs down that internal judgment. So, I would say in some sense it's not as secure, but that corporate America is kind of a false sense of security sometimes, and I think that's where I find myself. It really is. And I coach, a lot of people, when I'm coaching them, it's, they're like, oh, I'd love to go on my own, but I don't, and then they list the reasons, right? I hate selling. I couldn't do the market, like all the things. And so when you start to break it down, it's really, what's most important to you. And you mentioned vulnerability. And so, when I've done a lot of Brene Brown's work, I went through her sort of core values exercise, and the core values for me were freedom and growth. And so I have to look at all those opportunities that come up. Like, is this really going to feed that value for me of having that freedom and growth? Like I said, I'm a mom of 3 kids too. So I love being able to balance my my family life.
Aaron, you have any kids yet?
No children. Little dog.
Yeah. Hopefully you work. Hopefully One of these days, and kids aren't for everybody. And it took me a while, you know, like it's funny when I kind of get off on a tangent here. I have two kids. I have a 1.5-year-old son and a 7.5-year-old daughter. And, you know, I used to think that like something was wrong with people when they didn't want to have kids. And now I've gotten to this point in my life where, hey, they could choose whatever the hell they want. But now I also get it. Like I get it. I love my kids to death, but there's times when I'm like, oh man, like I look at some of my single friends or friends without kids, and I'm like, oh, it looks a lot easier just to kind of do that. But I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world here. And Jen, I want to go back to what you talked about before and kind of give my 2 cents on it. When I went out on my own, it was scary, but I was also, it changed my motivation because I have a mindset on day one when I went out my own business that it's zero fail. And what I mean by zero fail is it's okay to make mistakes, but zero fail meaning I am all in on this mission that I'm doing, this business I'm creating. And that's what keeps me focused and motivated. Even more, because when I worked for big companies. I worked for Amex, I worked for SiriusXM, I worked for big, you know, major corporations, clients like Pepsi and British Airways, where, you know, if I wasn't doing so well, whatever, you could kind of hide behind. You could be another cog in the wheel. You'll still get your paycheck. There's a comfort zone, and it wasn't really as motivating as it is now. It's a completely different world when you have your own business and you have no excuses, nowhere to hide, and no one to blame but yourself or anything. And that really kind of motivates you. Aaron, you ever think about going out on your own, or where do you stand with that?
Yeah, man. I dipped my toe in the water of it, you know, and I think I just kind of start with, you know, maybe a couple of a resume service or, you know, some interview coaching services. And, you know, it terrifies me. I'm hearing both of you guys. I would say it did terrify me. I'm less scared about it now. And I think it's because, and I actually saw this on one of your last lives, Adam, when you were just talking about how you doubled down on your strengths and you just went all in. And it's like, I know I'm good at what I do, you know? So, and it's often one of those things. I have a buddy right now. He asked me, he said, hey, him and his wife are in business together. They got some ventures going. And he said, hey, you know, would you be able to do some recruiting for me possibly? You know, I'm looking for this and that. And I'm like, man, you know, so it's something that I've toyed with the idea. I have, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a side hustle, right? And I think that everybody, and it's so funny, I was just on Greg Brenner's podcast about an hour ago. He could go away. It's my good buddy Russell. We were having a side conversation about future proofing, right? Like, in recruiting is interesting. Straight up, the economy. I mean, listen, we're potentially on the brink of war. I'm not getting into politics on this show, but listen, something could happen and we could go into a recession really quickly, right? And hiring stops. When hiring stops, they do not need me. They do not need you. They do not need recruiters. People are going to be out on the street looking for jobs, and there won't be a jobs, right? Supply and demand, pretty simple. But what do we do? And it really has got me thinking about what are those transferable skills? What else could I do? Where else could I kind of be side hustling? Where else could I put my interests in? And through this path of recruiting, you know, I found some other skills that I didn't think I had before, right? I'm not a coach, but I can coach, right? I could coach on interview skills, branding, communications, like all these things that I've learned on the side here. Jen, let's talk to you for a little bit. What's your approach to coaching? Without giving away all your secret sauce, I'd love to understand kind of your model. Yes, your secret sauce, but no, like, tell us a little bit more about, you know, how you work with clients to really understand their goals, objectives, and put them down the right path.
Yeah, good. I won't give you my secret sauce because I'd have to send you an hourly invoice.
Right, an NDA and a retainer on that one.
Right, all that stuff. Here, I guess I could sum up my approach through, you know, the feedback from my clients. And I would say that what I hear most from them is that I'm so relatable that all of the coaching comes with a story myself. I in no way am the expert on high, disseminating my wisdom. And so I think part of what I was just having a conversation yesterday about, sometimes I feel like because sort of the growth and personal growth is like the water I swim in, I'm often think, well, doesn't everybody know this stuff already? And they don't. And so that's where I start with people, is really like getting there. Where are they at right now? I mean, we take for granted, you know, you say goals and objectives. Well, some people have never set a goal outside of a New Year's resolution. That's right.
Exactly.
So, I mean, really for me, it's less about like a methodology and a process. It's about, who are you? What do you want in life? And I would say one of the things that I am 100% that I tell people up front, I don't coach on, I'm not a life coach. I'm not a career coach. There's no segment, because I've never understood how people can divide themselves up. You are one person. And so that may mean in a coaching session, we're talking about your 7.5-year-old who's giving you attitude,
She's all sass, I tell you.
Yeah, right. I mean, or your boss. So I would say it's holistic, and it's meeting people where, where they are.
It's fascinating. And I was talking to Greg about this on the last show, and it comes down to a mindset of accountability and taking responsibility for yourself, your actions, and your career, and not blaming others. And I know, and Aaron knows this as well, and you do, all three of us here, because we're working with professionals, that we have those conversations with them where they're either complaining, criticizing, they're talking about the negative things in their life and their career. And I like to throw it back on them and say, hey man, listen, like, I'm not here to just yes you to death and agree with you. I'm going to push it back on you. Are you taking personal accountability? Are you taking responsibility? Could you honestly say that you are doing your job in the best way possible? Or are you just blaming others for your actions, right? And making excuses. And that's a tough conversation to have with people. That's a tough one. What do you think about that, Aaron? I mean, you're a recruiter. You deal with people on the phone all day.
Yeah, and that conversation usually comes in that first, I call it like the consultation stage, when we're learning each other. And when you throw that back at them, I mean, but my disclaimer is, look, we're gonna hash it out. We're gonna get the good with the bad, and then if you walk with me, we're gonna get you to the finish line. But
I like it.
we're gonna get some dirt. We're gonna see some of the dirty laundry as well, and it may be uncomfortable. But I tell people, like, through your realness, through your transparency, and when you actually start to, I had a guy tell me, you know what, I do not like authority. And like, that was it was messed up. And so, like, because a lot of his jobs he left was, it was just differences between me and my boss. And he came to his own realization, like, man, I just think I have a problem with authority. And so it was one of those things where he eventually kind of ushered himself into, maybe I need to be more of a traveling salesperson where I can have a little more autonomy.
The autonomy
and I don't have
piece.
to and so we were able to walk, and that guy's, I mean, he's doing great now, but it's one of those things where, like you said, when you start to push back and you really kind of unpack those layers, that's what you find.
Yeah, I love it too. Jen, how do you break down the barriers with people to help them recognize or achieve a good level of self-awareness?
Hold up the mirror, and I think also share myself. And so I think sometimes that's what I think on, my website, I have a good coach tells you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And that's what I hear from people. It's that, it's about with all the respect and the compassion. It's kind of like what you're saying, Aaron. It's like, if it's not working for you, then what are you doing about it? I mean, I come back to the definition of insanity so many times. So I think that self-reflection, I think most people are that I've been fortunate enough to work with, they're willing to go there. A lot of people who are in that situation where it's, they've got that one foot out the door, they're totally frustrated. I always kind of start with, hey, let's put a date on the calendar. Let's assume you're all in until 6 months from now. Yeah. Let's give it your all. Like, if we can win this game, and I've had people who have fallen back in love with their job. I've had people who have completely left and done a complete 180 on their career.
It's an awakening. They needed some reality check.
Yeah. And also to take some of the confusion off the table, right? Like, if you're always in this, am I staying? Am I going? Is it my boss? Is it the money? Is it the level? Like, what do you want? So kind of grounding that down into like really specifics. I think just going through that, and also not rushing it. I'm kind of a get things done, fast-paced person. And so I try to really meet them where they are. Sometimes it takes a while for them to even kind of get into that conversation. What do I want? Am I willing to take the risks,
Jen, do you advise candidates on job search techniques? Is that in your arsenal?
I don't. I have, and I've actually mentored a couple recent college grads recently. Less on the job search. I've done a lot of resume work, but where I really like to spend is on prepping for interviews. Again, Aaron, back to your post. Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
So important.
That's a good transition here. So let me kind of start off with my 2 cents here. I think we could all agree that there is nothing more detrimental for a candidate than not preparing for an interview. And there's 2 points to that. Some people, either not having the time is not an excuse. If you do not prepare for an interview, it's showing a couple things, that you're not interested, or you're lazy, or you don't give a crap, right? One of those 3 things. Yeah. Because I've seen it time and time again, I'm sure Aaron could attest to this, where somebody thinks, I got this. Like, I know it. I don't need to prep. I look 5 minutes on the website. They go in. They think in their head that they're going to crush this interview. They go in, they completely bomb it. They get destroyed. They don't know anything. They didn't do any research. They have no prepared questions to ask. And I'll talk about that in a second. They walk out the door and they're like, holy crap, I really liked this opportunity. It sounded like everything I wanted, and I didn't put in the upfront work. And they have no one to blame but themselves. So that's number one. You got to do the prep, and I'm going to toss it to you in a minute for preparations, but how you prepare. But the other thing is, as a recruiter, and I'm sure Aaron too, if a candidate, when I get to the end of the interview and I say, do you have any questions for me? If you, and I'm being dead up with it.
Yeah.
If you do not have at least one good, not a half-assed question, I'm not talking like, hey, Adam, like, what do you think of the Mets versus the Cardinals coming up? But like, if you don't have like one good question for me, a relevant, deep, interesting question based on what we just talked about, not some, how's the culture? Do you guys have ping pong tables? No. I mean, like, hey, Adam, we just spoke about this. Tell me a little bit more about that management structure. How many people are really reporting to me in this role? Like, a real important question. You're done.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, you could be the best candidate on paper. Please, like, have some good questions for me. So, Aaron, let's talk about, aside from the questions to ask, let's talk about preparation. What are some guidelines that you advise your candidates on?
Excuse me. Yeah, I think the main thing is, and kind of some of the stuff you touched on, I like to know who it is that I'm going to be interviewing with. I advise, find out who they are. Are you interviewing with the hiring manager? Like, is this the person you're going to be reporting to, or just kind of a first rounder? Is this someone? How do they relate to your department where you're going to be at, right? I also like, of course, you want to make sure that you look into the company, find out who they are, who their competitors are.
Yeah, not just a website.
Yeah. How long they've been around. See if you can find the articles on them. If they're big enough, you may. But if they're something local, still, take your time, do your due diligence, and then you want to make sure that you ultimately are prepared. Posture wise, I'm kind of a big believer in posture. So
no slouching.
Yeah,
be relaxed. Be relaxed. Like, it's like an upfront, attentive.
Sure. And it's one of those things. I saw this on. Well, I've seen it many times, but I saw this on Grey's Anatomy, and it was actually the lady right before she did surgery. Every time she put her hands on her hips and she stood like Superman, and it was just kind of like a mental prep for her walking into the interview. And I think it clears your mind.
I like that.
Refocuses you in, and it looks weird, if you do it in public. But I'm like, who cares? Because I think at the end of the day, and I said this in my post today, don't waste your time and don't waste my time and don't waste the interviewer's time.
Exactly.
There's so many people applying that get lost in ATSs or whatever you want to complain or whatever you want to blame it on. When you get a seat at the table, if you walk in there and you do this thing halfway, just leave. You may as well not even show up. You wasted everyone's time.
Time is our most valuable asset on both sides. I appreciate that. So, Jem, before I ask you the same question, I want to give a big shout out to my man Joe Gill, who's joining us today from somewhere in the Mass area. Joe's my man. Joe's in the middle of a long job hunt as well. And Joe has a great interjection here. He says, "I always ask how the role will be evaluated, and that's a critical question. What are the metrics for success?" And I always like to kind of spin it and say, what does success look like in this position? That's how I position it. Hey, Aaron, this job sounds awesome for me. Can you tell me a little bit more how success is measured in this role? Okay, that's a great question. Well, you can be measured on sales, you can be measured on leads, acquisition, whatever it is. Jen, tell us a little bit about how you talk to candidates and prep them for interviews.
Yeah, I recently had an experience where I was working at a Starbucks, and they were maybe in their early 20s, came in and sat down with her friends, and I was trying not to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help myself. And they were giving her advice going into an interview, and she was so nervous she could barely speak. And it was the ultimate of the well-intentioned blind leading the blind. And I finally just leaned over and I said, "I'm sorry, I hate to eavesdrop, but this is what I do. Can I give you 5 minutes?" And I mean, luckily they were totally receptive. They were thanking me, whatever. And it was, I think the main thing is just like, be yourself. I know I said this to you last night, Adam, on my DM to you, but for me, the big discovery has been owning your story. Like, get your story straight. If it's like you're an accidental career person, Aaron, like you said, own that and make that your superpower. If it's academics, like whatever it is, but own it. And that superhero pose, right? That's Amy Cuddy's body language. It does make a difference how you present yourself. Yeah. So first and foremost for me, it's like the prep is know who you are, not who you want to portray yourself to be. Because if you pretend to be someone in a 45-minute interview and that's not who you are, that's going to come out.
No, they'll see right through that.
Yeah.
So Jen, how do you advise candidates to address career gaps, getting let go from jobs? How do you advise them to address that in a job interview?
I think you touched on it already, transferable skills. And again, like shifting to the audience, I'm saying about mothers specifically, who a lot of times have those gaps and they're so self-conscious of them. I read recently that a man will apply for a job posting if he feels like he's a 75% fit, and a woman won't apply for it unless she feels like 100% fit for that job.
I saw that too. Yeah.
That blew my mind, and yet it didn't surprise me at the same time. And so I think it's all of that. Is what are those transferable skills? We've got women who are, presidents of PTAs, who are, organizing audience of 400, like on a volunteer basis with no budget, no structure. Those are some mad skills that you can transfer, to certain types of positions. So I really help people get in line with what are the things that you're actually doing. And then if you do have a gap, and you have, especially for women, and you've taken time off, then own that. I'm a family person. This is part of who I am, because if I'm interviewing for a company that doesn't value that piece of my life, I don't want to work there. So I'd rather be upfront about that.
Yeah, and just to jump in for our online followers here, Bill has a good question, and I was going back and forth with him here on the questions here. A good question, and thanks for bringing this up, Bill. And I'll kind of put a spin on it. Bill is saying, like, when you're in an interview, when you're asking the interviewer questions, like, he's saying, like, why do you like working here? What motivated you to join this company? And I kind of spin it a little different way. I say, what do you love most about working here? So I think we're saying the same thing. What gets you excited about coming here? What do you love most about this company? So you're kind of turning around on the interviewer and saying, hey man, like, I'm looking to join your family. You're looking for me to join your family. Why should I join your family? Right? There's a lot of like those dating elements too. Like there is that emotional tie to it. Aaron, in your experience, like, you are the ambassador, you're the first line of defense, you're the first conversation that any future employee has before joining your organization. Where do you see people fail in that initial phone conversation with the internal recruiter?
For me, it is in my initial conversation, if they're not bringing any real depth to the conversation. I hate to use such a slang term, but if they come across too thirsty, if they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever you want to do. Yeah, I'm all in. Yeah. If they're just like guessing me, and it sounds like, man, I can like feel the desperation, and it's going to relay to my hiring managers. I'm like, man, this person's never going to get anywhere. And so I think that's where it is. If I can tell that, which some people say there's nothing wrong with this, but if they have applied to 75 different jobs, and I do call them back and I say, hey, John, this is Aaron from Western. You applied, and what company are you? Who? It was. Oh, okay, yeah. I did apply to that. Yeah. That kind of gives me a bad taste, So I think that kind of, and then I kind of know that sets the tone for the conversation. I know John knows really nothing about us. He didn't, this wasn't
applying to every single role trying to get through.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest for me.
And I think it comes down to relevancy too. And I talk about this in job searches as well. Like, don't just spray and pray, like really be laser focused. What are you doing there? Joe Gill asking a question here. A candidate's been freelancing for a bit, and someone in the interview says, why you been freelancing for a while, right? Because a lot of times, and I think this might be an old school mentality, Joe, and I'm going to answer your question here. I'm overgeneralizing here, but there's a lot of old school mentality that says freelancing isn't equal to full-time. And in this day and age of the gig economy, I think that's completely wrong. I think that you have to treat everybody fairly as freelancing. I mean, technically, I'm a freelancer. I'm a consultant. I am a contractor. So call it whatever the hell you want. I'm working for myself. If you're freelancing, you're working for yourself. If you're on a 1099, you're working for yourself, and that's what that means. But a lot of people will say, hey, you've been freelancing for a while. Why? Right? Jen, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I love this question. I had the chance to mentor a young gentleman that I met at a networking event, and we had this conversation. He had freelance, gone through multiple, really great, amazing experiences, but now decided he wanted to go in-house. And so I worked with him on packaging himself. Let's just call him Bob. And I'm like, this is about who you are now. You are Bob Inc. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, You are Bob Inc. You have gone and got all this experience, all this insight from all these amazing companies, and now you're going to bring that wealth of knowledge to one place. They should be dying for your expertise. And he was like, damn, I am Bob Inc., right? And so, and then he landed this amazing job. I saw him like about 6 weeks later. He landed an amazing job. When he came up to me, he goes, I sat in the interview and was asked a question like that. And he said, you know what? I'm Bob Inc. And it gave him a place to stand, because for me, freelancing, the last 7 years for me have been the hugest growth in my career, because I get to have these little insights into all the ways all these different companies and individuals work. So I think it's a tremendous, tremendous asset.
Yeah, and let's talk about resumes for a minute there too. And I'll give my 2 cents on it. I don't care about your formatting, just make it clean and easy to read. And I have a rule of thumb: unless you're a doctorate or some kind of like ridiculous written writer with all these, like, I don't know, or in entertainment and you're doing your theatrical credits, whatever, like, try to keep it to 2 pages. And that's just a rule of thumb for me from 2 things. One, it's a readability perspective, and I want to see how succinct you are, how you're able to kind of really synthesize all of your, as much as you can, into somewhat of a controlled space. And because I don't want you to read 4 pages of nonsense. I just don't. I'm being dead honest. I'm a recruiter, man. I got to go through a lot of, I got to go through a lot of resumes, and I wanted to see it actionable. I want to see results. I do not want to see a copy and paste of a job description. And any good recruiter could see that in 2 seconds. If you copy and paste your job description of your current job and put it in your resume, I am going to pass on it in 2 seconds. I will pass that to the left-hand side. I don't even care. It's out of my face there. Cover letters. Yes, no, thoughts on them? Aaron, you first.
I'm going to lean more towards no. And, you know, I know this is kind of really split amongst the recruiting community. I prefer, if you want to say something, give me a solid, you know, summary at the top. You know, give me 4 or 5 sentences, just kind of who you are, where you are, what's your next move. You know, the cover letter. Yeah, I guess I've just never been a whole fan of it, because if you give me the snapshot of who you are and I'm going through your resume, I'm going to find out all this information on the phone anyway. I think, like you mentioned, being succinct, if you can catch me with that blurb, or, you know, kind of whatever you want to call it, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call you. We're going to have that conversation. So I personally, you know, not a big fan of them. I don't think there's anything wrong. I've seen some really dope cover letters, and I think they're great. I will say, I was looking at one today, and the guy, it was written very well when we talked. So, but, you know, I'm not going to not call you if you don't have it. Yeah.
Jen, how do you advise clients on cover letters?
Yeah, I am a little probably more old school. I say I agree with everything you said, Aaron. Do that and do the cover letter. I think speaking into the audience, you may be generationally working with a recruiter who more traditionally was, you know, that cover letters were required up until 3 years ago. It wasn't even a controversial thing.
Yeah, sometimes it wasn't optional.
I don't think. Yeah. It really wasn't. And so I don't think they do any harm. I just wouldn't have that take the place of any substance on the resume. I think it allows you to, you know, share a little bit more in terms of your personality and your voice, which is what I like. And that for me sometimes helps to differentiate candidates. So I say do them and personalize them. It can't hurt.
Okay, I'm totally cool with that. And my stance is too, I'm kind of in the middle of the road here. I think that a cover letter is important if you have to explain something, if you have to explain a gap in employment, if you could call it out up front there. I also think it's important, like, for example, I in the course of 4 years, I had 3 kids, and I took the time to be, you know, to be a mom, and that's cool. And if you look at my resume, I was awesome at my job before. I'm going to be awesome at my job when I go back to it. Like, don't judge me on that. I think it's important too. And also, maybe if you were laid off or if you moved, any way you could kind of get ahead of it. But here's what I will guide. I've seen this countless times, I'm sure Aaron has as well, where people use their same cover letter. They don't personalize it. They don't make it any different. It's a reflection of their resume, and that's a waste of everyone's time. And second, you can make a major mistake here. If you leave in, I swear to God, if you leave in the name of the old company in that cover letter, like, it's not an automatic rejection, but it's a strike. It's definitely a strike.
Really? That's not automatic?
It's a swinging strike. It's a swinging strike. It's or you're swinging at something so far out of the strike zone, and like, it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, noted. Like, it's kind of a strike, but I will give you the benefit of the doubt that maybe you're having an off day. It's not the same as some other, like a no question, you're out. Like, you're out. You're off my thing here. So let's bring this home, because I want to bring the podcast here. You know, I want to wrap this one up here. So, Jen, What is the greatest piece of advice that you've ever received that you take action on daily?
Ooh, that's good. That I was going to say the greatest advice, but that I take action on daily, because that's actually my current goal right now, is to align my daily habits with the goals that I've set, to look for congruence there, because I've been reading so much about habits. And so I would say the best advice would be my word, and taking action every day, whether that's get my butt out of bed and go to the gym, or be on time for an appointment, or whatever it is. I would say be my word.
Aaron, you have a brand new recruiter day one sitting in front of you. You have to give that recruiter one golden piece of advice to be successful in recruiting. What is it?
Treat people right, be inclusive, and listen. You'll find out a lot. I think that is the biggest thing that I live by, and I think they're going to day one recruiter. That'll go far. Listen, and then take action from what you hear.
I love it.
Yeah.
Great stuff. And question for both you guys. I'll start with Jen here. 2020 attainable goal.
Did you say start with me or Aaron? You cut out there first.
Jen.
2020 attainable goal is to launch my new business, whose mission is to end isolation in the world.
Love it. Aaron, what about you, man?
Well, since you guys already kind of brought it up earlier, it is to officially launch my coaching services. I'm going to start off small and see what it scales up into.
I love it. And last but not least, we have a question from Joe Gill. What is he talking about? He's talking about recommendations on LinkedIn. Joel, I'll get to that in a minute. Recommendation, just my quick take on it. Recommendations have to be from people that are really like actual real recommendations. There's a lot of things going on LinkedIn where people are literally saying, try to get as many recommendations. But if you have 1,000 recommendations, we're all going to see through that stuff. I have to be careful cursing here. LinkedIn doesn't like it. Like, just be mindful of, they have to be real connections, real referrals, because if you flood the system, that's bad. Make it meaningful here. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. Jen Fox, where can folks find you? Where can folks connect with you?
On LinkedIn, my favorite place to hang out, and OrgSavvy.com.
Awesome. Aaron Moore, what about yourself, my man?
They'll find me here. I'm probably going to go ahead and reboot my Facebook again. But yeah, I live here on LinkedIn, and that's really it.
I love it. Both of you, thank you so much for joining me. This really worked out well. I hope that you two could connect. I hope that you two could form a relationship, and I'm here for both of you. Anything that you need. Quick plug here on the regular podcast, the weekly podcast coming out there. You'll see that in the upper right-hand corner for those of you following at home. Episode 47 dropped yesterday with someone really close to me. His name is Joel Lunenfeld. For those who do not know Joel was the youngest CEO at Moxie Interactive. Joel was my buddy in college, my mentor, 2 years older than me. Number 3 at Twitter, VP of Global Marketing. Incredible life, career story. He said at the age of 35 that he was going to retire at the age of 40, and that's what he did. Took time off to do philanthropy, build some side business and hustles. Now he's the CMO of NorCal Cannabis, the third largest cannabis company in California. It's an absolutely incredible career story. I urge everyone to listen to this and get some inspiration about their career. Coming up next week on episode 48, I'm going to shift gears a little bit to the other side, and I have a guest by the name of Max Stossel. Max is he worked with Gary Vaynerchuk in the early years, so he's got the social media background, but he's morphed his life and career into poetry and spoken word, but really talking about how social media is ingrained and affected in our lives. So check him out as well. Aaron, Jen, thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us. And to everyone watching, please catch us next week on the podcast live. We're trying to figure out some great guests coming up. Check out the show and take care of each other and enjoy your week. Take care, everybody. Be good.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.